Welcome, friends. This is Gleaning and Gathering. And yes, I'm your host, Eric Heimlich. It's great to be here with you today. And we are back at the old desk, at the old microphone, and here today to talk about being curious. Curious people are rarely cynical, and cynical people are very rarely curious. Carey Nieuwhof, quote from his podcast recently. And it got me to thinking about curiosity. And there are some things about curiosity that have driven really a lot of things in my life. One of them is that because I'm interested in things, in people, I go looking. And because I go looking, I find things that work many times better than I would if I was just satisfied with the status quo. And so being curious for me has always been asking questions and thinking about why is this or why is this not? And I think that for me, continuing to remain curious has been also one of the ways that God has helped keep me humble. Because I don't think that pride and genuine curiosity really go together. Heard somebody else recently say, pride tells you to hide everything that you don't know, and humility tells you to ask about everything you don't know. And I think that's really true. You know, if you don't know something, the best way is to find someone who does know and ask them, or go looking for answers. But if you think you already have the answer, you're not going to go looking for it. And that's what pride says. I already know. I don't need to ask. You're not curious. You're not really interested in learning more because you already think you know it all. You know, another aspect of this is in regard to our relationships. Someone said your relationships are determined by the quality of your conversations. And I think that's really true. And I think it's important in relationships to remain curious. You know, when we're in conversations with other people, do we try to be interested or interesting? People who are interesting, they're trying to convince someone else that they're the smartest person in the room. They know. And listen to me about how much I know about this subject. But a person who's genuinely interested is asking questions and then is listening well to the other person. And what I found is that when you are really interested, conversations are far more interesting. I have never met a boring person. I've met some people that, at least on a surface level, didn't present well. But when you begin to dive in and really learn about other people, I'm not just talking about at that surface level, but you're beginning to dive in and really explore what makes them tick. I have never ceased to be amazed at the depth that's there. Everybody has a bag. Everybody has something that they're dealing with. But they also have something that they're amazing at. They have some gift that God's given them. And I think that when we really go looking for that, when we're really curious and we really want to know them, and we start with the premise, this is an individual made in the image of God, who is special, who is absolutely worth my time, and they have something to teach me, that most of the time you're going to come away from conversations having learned something. And normally it's something that's going to surprise you. I was listening to another podcast this week by Will Guidara, and if you haven't read his book yet, Unreasonable Hospitality, you absolutely should. But in that podcast, he said that hospitality is a dialogue, not a monologue. You know, there are those who speak at people, and then there are those who speak with people. And I don't know about you, but I want to be one of those who speaks with people. To be genuine and hospitable, you really need to be curious. We've all had that experience of going to a new place. Maybe it's a new church. Maybe it's a place that we've never been before and we don't know anyone, and we're the new person in the room. And everyone turns and kind of looks at us questioningly. And they don't really welcome us in to the circle. There's clearly a circle that's already there. We're not in it. And it's not that they're actively trying to keep you out. They're just not actively trying to bring you in. And genuine hospitality that's curious will welcome the stranger. It will go out and actively bring people in. And I think it's really important as a leader to recognize that our energy and our message are there to impact our people and not the other way around. We don't need to be just waiting on them to welcome us and waiting on them to affirm us. No, we need to be affirming them. And we need to be going out and actively trying to include them. Being curious, asking good questions, and trying to create a culture of hospitality. We need to create a culture where feedback is normalized. So praise is affirmation, but criticism is investment. And we should have a culture where people expect and even desire to have criticism. I was just listening to a conversation between my daughters last night, and Kaylin was talking about one of her favorite, I think it is her favorite teacher, Joanna Stratton, and saying one of the things that she appreciates so much about her is her feedback on papers and assignments that she turns in. She said a lot of times she'll turn in an assignment and she just gets 100. And she said, what's so frustrating to me is I've really put time, I've put energy into this, and all they do is they just give me 100 and they don't give me any feedback. And she said, the thing I really appreciate about her is that she doesn't always give me 100. Instead, there are times when she'll give me a 90 or an 85. And along with that, provide some constructive criticism, some feedback. This could have been better. And she said, I really appreciate that. And so I think that as leaders, we need to create a culture where feedback is normalized. People are not only expecting it, they're appreciating it, and they want it. They desire it because they do really want to get better. But in order to do that, as a leader, we have to be confident enough in who we are and willing to allow people to actually say the things that will help us to be better. Nothing corrects our life and our thinking like Bible reading and reflection. And this past week, I was headed to Chicago. I had to get my passport renewed in an expedited way because I didn't realize that the expiration date on your passport isn't really the expiration date. And if it expires within the next 6 months, many countries will not let you travel internationally. And so my passport was going to expire the end of January. And originally when I saw it, I thought, great, it's after the trip, I'll be fine. And then I find out after we were getting tickets, no, I can't actually travel with that. So I had to make a trip to Chicago. And so I ended up leaving at 3:45 in the morning, and it was an exhausting trip. The weather wasn't the greatest, and so some of the roads were not exactly the best. And so I was traveling up there for an 8:30 appointment in Chicago, and I got up there, found the parking garage, got parked, and after getting through security and actually submitting my application for the expedited passport, I was actually in and out. I was finished heading out the door by 8:10 a.m. It was amazing. The U.S. State Department did an amazing job. I was truly grateful, and I was in and out. But that's not how it started. I ended up getting there to the building, went in the wrong entrance, and the security guard kindly told me that I'd come in the wrong way and that I needed to go around the other side. So I did. The door was open. It was a revolving door, and so I went through it and into this lobby, and a security guard met me there and said, you can't come in yet. We're not open. And I said, well, when did they open? She said 7:45. And I said, well, can we just stay here in the lobby? It's really cold outside. She said, no, you have to stand out on the sidewalk. And it's 10 degrees outside. It's Chicago. It's windy, and it's just miserable, And so me and a little group of others were huddled out there on the sidewalk, and it was it was frustrating. And in my frustration, I just grabbed my phone and recorded a short video and uploaded it to Facebook, and boom, told the world. Frustration. This government, this is what you get. All those things. It wasn't one of my wisest moments in posting, and it certainly wasn't necessary to say. And I was posting my frustration again in the moment. And it's the blessing and the curse of social media, right? That any moment and every moment can be shared in ways that travel very, very far. And it amplifies voices and feelings. And many times it says things that don't necessarily need to be said or heard. And while I still think that there probably could be a better system than the one that they have there was a nice big lobby, and there was areas there where people could have stayed that weren't in the secured zone. They had the lines all set up, and there was plenty of security. But, be that as it may, I stood out on the sidewalk with my fellow citizens and waited. And finally, they came and allowed us in, and when they did, we were able to get in a timely manner. But there was one friend who was kind enough to message me, and this is what she said. Brother Eric, I'm not trying to be confrontational at all, but having a complaint come to me regarding your post that I thought you would want to be aware of. An unsaved individual is asking me why you would be dogging, in their words, on people who are only doing their jobs. They looked up the opening time, 8:15, and felt that they were being kind to open 30 minutes early at 7:45. They're not understanding the negativity when businesses aren't required to open until the stated time. We have a lot of respect for you and not trying to be critical, but thought you may want to be aware. I deleted the post, but I was also very thankful for someone who was willing to invest the time to share feedback with me that was helpful. I don't want my life, my influence, to reflect negatively on King Jesus. The bigger issue is the reputation of King Jesus. And my post didn't represent him well. And so what I needed to do was to go back and not just delete the post, but I needed to post an apology for that. And so I did. I'd made the mistake publicly, and I needed to own it publicly. Eating my little piece of humble pie wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do humanly, but it's what I needed to do. It's what Jesus would want me to do. And I guess that's one of the lessons that I'm learning, is that to normalize that kind of feedback and to be willing to take criticism and to see it as an investment, not as something that's meant to destroy me, but something that's meant to make me better. But in order to do that, there has to be a degree of humility. I was listening to another podcast, and this phrase stuck out to me. Pride walks into the room and says, "Here I am." Humility walks into the room and says, "There you are." I love that. As a pastor, we're not out there to perform. We're there to brag on a good God. If you allow success to go to your head, then failure will go to your heart. I think it was Tim Keller that said that. Humility is voluntary. Humiliation is not. And what Scripture says to us is that we're to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, and in due time, He will lift us up. Humility really is an accurate self-view. It's the ability to see ourselves in light of who God is and who he made us to be. You know, someone else said that people admire your strengths, but they relate to your weaknesses. There's only one superhero in this story. And friend, you aren't it. And so as leaders, we need to be vulnerable. We need to accept our weaknesses. And we need to be willing to own our mistakes. I don't know where you're at in all that, but I know as a leader, one of the most challenging and difficult things to do is to be willing to put the gear into reverse, to go back and say, I'm sorry. I didn't handle that right. I shouldn't have said that. And you may be dealing with some conflict in your life. You may be dealing with an unreasonable church board, or what you think is an unreasonable church board. You may be dealing with someone in your church that's really, really challenging, really difficult. But are you seeking first to understand? Or are you just trying to be understood? Are you willing to take the high road? To be the bigger person? Or you just need to be right? And let everybody else know that you're right? Because if that's your philosophy and that's the way you're living, you're going to end up in a very dark place. You know, pride tells us that we need to hide everything we don't know. You don't always have to be the person who has the answer. Instead, you can ask. And humility tells you to ask about everything that you don't know. And sometimes the best way to learn is to start with, I don't know. That's a great question. Why don't we go find out? We need to be more concerned with an overseer's life than how charismatic or gifted they are. And unfortunately today, many times for many places, the only thing is, is the guy present well? Is he someone who is a charismatic, gifted, upfront kind of person? But scripturally, 1 Timothy 3:1, we need to be concerned about their life. Chris Hodges wrote, you're only as sick as your secrets. And so as a leader, what are the things that you need to be sharing in some context to be able to find healing? I think in order to do that, we've got to be willing to humble ourselves. We've got to be willing to seek help. And again, not just walk into the room and have all the answers, but to recognize that we don't. Those are the few of the things that I'm thinking about this morning. And I just wanted to share it with you. In closing, I just want to ask one question. What is driving you? What will success look like for you at age 80, if you live to be that old? How we lead ourselves affects everything. And sadly, most people spend more time planning a vacation than they do on actually planning their life. And I think in large part because they're just not very curious. And so I want to encourage you, ask some good questions. Think about where you're at. Think about where you're going. And be humble. Be willing to invite someone else in to look at your life and the plan of your life and the trajectory of your life, and give them the red pen and invite feedback. Normalize it. See it as the gift that it is. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Friends, let's not believe our own press. Instead, let's be humble. Let's be willing to voluntarily give up those places of authority and be willing to let in the truth. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.